Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today, I'm going to be bringing to you my Armada upgrade cards. I'm going to be doing best in slot, and I'm going to be covering all of the upgrade slots that are available with two exceptions. I'm not really talking about commanders because I feel like that's something worthy of its own video, and I do talk about commanders a lot. I'm not talking about titles today either because they're not actually an upgrade slot, although you could argue that they are, but I feel like titles are worthy of their own discussion as well. Also, I do have the latest giveaway winner coming at the end of this video as well. So if you didn't already know, I do have giveaways running all the time. All you have to do is be a subscriber or leave a comment on this or one of my videos. You're automatically entered to win. So the next one will start very soon, but this one ends today. So I'm going to be announcing the winner for that. And before I jump into this, also I want to just talk a little bit about the some of the ways that you can support the channel. If you guys aren't already aware, I do have a Patreon, which definitely helps out. I don't really make much money from YouTube ad revenue, and Patreon is definitely a way to kind of help. Again, all of these expansions, all of the products that I review, I buy them. I think I've probably bought 99% of stuff. FFG sent me some ships one time, and that's pretty much it. So my point is that it's expensive to do all of this, so that's one way that definitely helps out. And there's a lot of different Patreon exclusive rewards that you can get if you want to check out. There's different tiers of support, and I also do sometimes I do promo giveaways on Patreon as well as a kind of an extra bonus. It's not really bound to any specific tier, but I'll also just do that kind of randomly. There's no set schedule for that. But also on top of that, we also have some merch is another way that you can support the store. There are t-shirts down below. If you want to see the Teespring shop, you should see some different face shields. We've got like the Boba Fett face mask right here. And this is, it's a gator neck. Actually, it'll say neck gator. We've got different types. We've got the Ahsoka one. We've got stuff for Double Critical Podcast. We've got the Double Critical shirts. We've got Double Critical face masks as well. We've got all of that stuff down there. And all that stuff also helps support the channel. These are actually really good for cold weather as well. And it's summertime right now, so it's not cold in too many places. But in a couple of months, it's going to get there. These actually make great Father's Day gifts if you're looking for something like that. Or if you have birthdays coming up, let your friends and family know. And they're going to make great stocking stuffers, too, for later on in the year. So always just keep that stuff in mind. And I got new designs coming all the time. So that is also another way that you can help support the channel. All right. With all that admin stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the video. All right, so first thing I want to talk about is the officer slot, because the officer slot is on every ship. Every ship has an officer slot. Well, so far, I wonder if one day we'll see ships that don't have officer slots. But some ships have more than one officer slot. There's a lot of competition for the officer slot because the officers are amazing, and there's so many of them, right? There's a lot of competition. And so instead of just giving you the absolutely best one here, I'm going to talk about a couple of runners-up because I've got to say one of my favorite officers. Now, I play very offensive-oriented, so one of my favorite officers was Intel Officer. Now, on a ship that is designed to be chucking lots of dice, Intel Officer is one of my favorite officers to put on that ship. This was something that I ran a lot in the early days of Armada, even up to as recent as 2 years ago. Once we got Emperor Palpatine, I thought maybe we wouldn't need Intel Officers as much anymore, but it turns out Intel Officer can stack with Emperor Palpatine as a commander, and so, I really liked Intel Officer, but it's not really the one-size-fits-all. It's not that big of a deal, but I wanted to give it an honorable mention. There's also a lot of officers that are faction-specific. So as far as the Empire goes, I think I had to give first place to Darth Vader as an officer there. He is absolutely the most significant officer I've ever seen come to the Empire, and that's there's some stiff competition. There's a Palpatine officer, there's Minister Tua, there's a lot of really powerful officers for the Empire. But this is first off, he's a 1-point officer, so he's absolutely amazing for his cost. But he completely removes the requirement to have a Darth Vader commander for only 1 point. I mean, not completely removes it, but almost completely removes it, because the number of times you'll need to use him are usually limited, and the amount of benefit he gains for that, especially for being only 1 point, it's really just out of this world. So I really feel like he's almost a game changer for the Empire. And for the Rebels, I had to, and there's stiff competition for the Rebels as well, no doubt. I had to give this one to Lando because he is just so profoundly game changing, and he's always been there. He's such a difference maker in every game that he's used in. He's such an incredible insurance policy, and usually is put, and he works on any ship too, but he tends to work really well on the ships that really, really need him. And so I think Lando is, the all-star for the Rebels. Now, as far as my number one slot for faction independent, or maybe number one overall, you may disagree with this, and that's another part of the beauty of it. Definitely let me know in the comments section what you either disagree with, or maybe you feel I passed up on something, or it was something that you think maybe I missed. But for number one slot, I kind of have to give it to Strategic Advisor, almost in a broken capacity. Now, you may love or hate this guy, but one thing is for certain, Strategic Advisor changed the way the game is played. It's not faction specific, and it is restricted to large ship only, but he totally changed the way the game is played, and that you can now run, two large ships, or one large ship, and, not a whole lot of other stuff. You can run lists that were not even feasible before. And for 4 points, it gives you an entire other activation. Of course, this was met with a lot of counterplay, but it was so hard to counterplay a Strategic Advisor versus another Strategic Advisor because the competition for the officer slot is so heavy. I just feel like he's probably the most MVP as far as officer slot because of that. Next up, we're going to talk about the support team. Now, the support team is almost like people, right? Almost like officers. They were kind of like right next to the officers in a lot of cases. This one, usually I think you can probably guess which my number one overall is going to be for support team. But before I get to that, I do want to do an honorable mention to a really cool support team that, has come out fairly recently. And that's the Auxiliary Shields team. It allows you to boost those side arcs up to a little bit higher than they were already. I feel like this is a really welcome option for a lot of ships. I think this was almost a single-handedly a fix for the Nebulon for only 3 points. And if you guys know, I'm a fan of the Nebulon, so I really like what this is able to do, and so I love the way it helps out Nebulons, especially those that really need it. Because Nebulons really need it, and it can help other ships too. It's not only a Nebulon fix, but it's really, really good on Nebulons, and so it was nice to see some real competition for this slot. But competition aside, nothing really beats Engine Techs. I have to give it to Engine Techs for number one best in slot for the support team. It's pretty much, when you think, it's the defining card for this entire upgrade slot. When you think of a support team, you think Engine Techs. Any ship that can take support team, you instantly think Engine Techs. The Architans have 2 versions. Only one of them can take support team. When you're running that version, you take Engine Techs. When you're taking a victory with the Harrow title that grants it support team, you give it Engine Techs. When you're running a Demolisher, more often than not, it has Engine Techs. There are some exceptions where certain specific ships for doing a very different role will run certain other support teams, but those are rare and they're few and far between. Engine Techs, by far the best upgrade for this slot. Next up, we're going to talk about the weapons team. Yes, it's another team. The weapons team probably also has one that immediately comes to mind for you, but it's different in this case because this is actually an upgrade slot that is full of gems. There are a lot of really good weapons teams. So while there's probably one that comes to mind right away, at least there is for me, there's quite a few that also come to mind. The winner, I think, may have been clear, but it's tough because there's really a lot of very good stuff in here. And there are some faction-specific stuff, but I'm going to start off with Local Fire Control. Local Fire Control here is our newest weapons team and is also really cool in that it does the new thing. It allows a lot of ships to take the new Salvo Defense token. Now, this doesn't make it best in slot, but I thought it's so interesting and really adds a whole lot of competition for that coveted slot of weapons team. I really wanted to include this one as an honorable mention because I think if you haven't already got any of the new Wave 8 stuff, you should definitely check out Local Fire Control on some of your favorite ships, like the Assault Frigate Mark II, for example. It just really does a lot of good things for the ship that it's on and for the game. I had to mention Ordnance Experts. This one was actually in consideration for number one. I think this one is going to end up in second place for me. In that it is such a requirement on so many ships, and that it's it's pretty much the de facto requirement for black dice ships. Even those that used to run Darth Vader as their commander would still often run Ordnance Experts in addition to that for the extra padding. But it's great because it's every time you're attacking, you can reroll any number of your black dice. So it's so flexible. Now it does have the restriction of only working on about half the ships in the game because, hey, only half that many ships have, black dice and the weapons team. But it also has that restriction of it's only going to work once you get up really close. And so that's, I think, the thing that kind of edged it not to win and make way for our gunnery team, which had to be number one here. Gunnery team is, again, it's also not working on every ship, but on the ships that it does work on, it works at all ranges, and of course you're paying for it, though it is more points. But just the idea of letting you take that huge front arc on a Star Destroyer or a Liberty or anything that has one really predominant arc, even on assault frigates, for example, assault frigate Mark IIs with those Akbar fleets. I mean, gunnery team established itself as kind of the dominant player in the weapons team slot pretty early on in the game. I would say as early as Wave 2 once Akbar came out. So, and of course the ISD came out as well. It was, gunnery team was already kind of good on like a Victory or maybe an assault frigate before that, but it just became so much better after Wave 2. And there's a lot of new upgrades that have come out that have made it even better on top of that. So gunnery team's going to win first place for the weapons team slot. Next up, offensive retrofit. I do like the offensive retrofit. It's definitely one of those versatile slots. It has a lot of very different things. It's kind of like the officer slot in that regard, in that it started off as being stuff that had a lot of squadron based things, but also turned into a more versatile thing. And it's weird because you think offensive retrofit, shouldn't this be extra guns? And it's like, nah, I think offensively as far as your squadrons being your offense, right? So one of the first cards that I think of when I think of this slot is Boosted Comms. It definitely deserves a spot. It's very close to the top because I see this one a very lot. This one may be one of the most played. It's certainly in contention for one of the most popular offensive retrofits that are out there because it supports squadrons. It allows those carriers to have a much wider circle in which they can activate stuff. It allows carriers to be farther and safer away from the battle, and so I really love it for that purpose. And also when you want to outfit those carriers with all kinds of extra things that affect their squadrons, it's kind of also almost a force multiplier in that regard because it lets you hit even more squadrons, predominantly if presuming they're in range, right? So, or if they were just out of range at medium, this just gives you a lot more flexibility on how to put all those other squadron-based tools to work. So it's a very good option. And there's a couple that kind of work in the same ballpark in there, but I had to give the number one slot to Disposable Capacitors. It's one of the semi-newer cards. I think this one came out in Wave 6 for Armada, but it just did so much for the ships that it works for. It was so powerful. So on the ships that this one really works for, it is a must-have in my opinion. Like a Victory, for example, it's just absolutely incredible how much of a difference this makes on turning a ship like a Victory Star Destroyer into a super deadly threat, even at range 3, when other ships aren't nearly as deadly as the Victory can potentially be. Now, some of you might disagree with this, because this is, of course, my own opinion. Some of you might flip-flop these two, or put a different one in there altogether. There are quite a few options for offensive retrofits, so I wouldn't be mad at you if you disagreed with me here, but I absolutely love Disposable Capacitor. I think it's one of those things that makes the Peltas, potentially, a lot more deadly too. I used to have this Voltron list once upon a time that would run 2 of the 60-point Peltas, and you had 2 red and 2 blue for each of them. But hey, if you lined them up right next to each other, it was a Star Destroyer, right? And so you put Disposable Capacitors on those, and all of a sudden you've got 8 dice at long range, and that's like, there's a lot of really fun stuff you can do with Disposable Capacitors, and I think it's just on the ships that really work for it. It's such an incredibly huge improvement that I feel like it makes it's more of a difference maker than Boosted Comms is on the ships that it takes. Although, again, maybe Boosted Comms works on a slightly wider variety of ships, but I love Disposable Capacitors, so I'm a little biased on that one. Again, I play more offensive-minded as well. All right, so next up, we're going to be talking about those boarding team type cards that use both offensive retrofit and weapons teams. This is, kind of a hybrid because they don't have a special name, but you kind of call them that. I'm just giving this one to boarding troopers. There are some specific ones. There's faction specific ones, but with a lot of those, they tend to do like long-term effects, but you have to be up close. And by the time you're up close, I feel like, their value is diminished. Like, oh, Darth Vader is going to get rid of an upgrade car, or Cham Syndulla is going to change all your dials. All right, well, I mean, that's great against a Super Star Destroyer, but what about other stuff? Like, if you're already that close enough to be shooting off black dice attacks, to be at range 1, you probably have that ship close to dead already, if not this turn. So, I don't really appreciate as much the long-term effects of a lot of the other boarding cards, the boarding team cards. But boarding troopers is the one that is often used, specifically with the Avenger title, to ensure that it's short-term gains. It's like, oh, let's get rid of those defense tokens. Let's spend those defense tokens, and now we're going to shoot you and hopefully kill you, since you won't have those defense tokens available. Whether and usually it's with Avenger, but I think this is probably the best in slot for the double slot there. Now we're on to defensive retrofit. Now you probably already have an idea of what I'm going to choose for the winner for defensive retrofit as well, although it wasn't a completely clear-cut choice because there was a little bit of competition. In recent days, I'd say early warning system has been a much more popular upgrade than I initially thought it might have been. It's actually a really good card, especially depending on how certain fleets approach each other now. It can do more than potentially any other defensive retrofit, and it's a really good card. It does kind of call for a little bit more planning and tactics and decision making, and will probably punish you if you make the wrong decision. So it might not be a newer player's first choice, but it is a solid option, and it does pretty well when played correctly. And so I got to give early warning system some points for that. But still, that being said, to me, nothing beats electronic countermeasures. It's just too good, and that actually is a problem. It's too good, right? If they ever go back and have to change cards, I wonder if this is something that maybe should get changed, because it's in so many lists, it's a must-have. In so many lists, it's an auto-include. I've lost games, lots of games, just for not having this, where it would have made all the difference in the world. Oh, I've got 14 damage coming on your Star Destroyer. Oh, but I have just the 1 accuracy. I guess you're not bracing. Ba-boom. Stuff like that. Things like that happen. And so you need electronic countermeasures on a ship that can take it. If that has like a single brace, like you need it, right? Of course, now with a gate, you don't necessarily need it as much, but you still kind of need it. You still do. All right. So next up is Fleet Command. Now this is only available on the a few ships. There's not that many ships that can take Fleet Command, and I did not get the pictures in here, but I mean this one's obviously going to be intensify firepower. With fleet support, however, it's a toss-up between a couple. I've got to give it to Bomber Command Center. Bomber Command Center is incredible in that it's like such a force multiplier on bomber heavy fleets. It gets a lot of points there, but there's a big part of me that was really thinking about how sneaky and janky is Slicer Tools, and how can that be so incredibly nasty to the right fleets, and sometimes it is. Slicer Tools has won me games before, forcing ships to not be able to nav and being them stuck flying off the board. I made a Super Star Destroyer fly off the board one time because I kept hitting it with Slicer Tools. Now there are defenses against this, but when it works really, really well. But best in slot here, I had to give it to CommsNet. CommsNet is so cheap, and it works in 100% of fleets. CommsNet always works, and that's really kind of why I had to give it. Even though it's not as cool or flashy as the other two, CommsNet is Old Faithful. It's reliable, and you'll never regret taking CommsNet. All right, next we've got experimental, and experimental. Look, there's only one ship, right? There's only one ship that can take the experimental retrofit, and that's the Interdictor. So we've got Targeting Scrambler here, and Targeting Scrambler is a really, really good card. It's going to be amazing in those up close and personal battles. It especially really pairs very, very well with the Interdictor title. but I had to give the slight edge to Grav Shift Reroute. And I get that you may disagree a little bit, but Grav Shift Reroute in this case is so awesome and always evolving as new deployments come out, as new tactics develop, as new missions and objective cards come out. Grav Shift Reroute can change all of that to your favor. So it's and it's a list defining card that's totally going to change the way you build your list too. So and it's only 2 points on top of all that. Grav Shift Reroute is absolutely phenomenal, so I had to give it to that. Plus, you can take them both, right? Because you can take an interdictor that takes both. So like you don't even have to make the choice. As super weapon, there's really not much to talk about with super weapons. I just gave it this super heavy composite beam turbo laser because it has wicked damage potential, and I've had a lot of fun running that with it. But there's really not a whole lot of competition for super weapons. There's only 3. And then the one for the Starhawk is not very good right now. I don't like that one. So yeah, and out of the 2 for this guy, I gave it to this one. All right, now we're on to the heavy hitters. We're on to Ordnance at this point. Ordnance has a couple that are actually Ordnance has a lot that are actually really good, and a lot are more situational. I had to give some points for the cheap external racks, which is really, really good. Works on so many ships. Is very, very common on small ships. Very, very common on cheaper ships. Sometimes even finds its way onto more expensive ships when price is the issue because it only costs 3 points. And sometimes I can fit that. You know what? That's going to work. And so I love it. I love external racks. It's not going to win best in slot for me, but it's certainly a contender. And for some of you, it may be best in slot. Assault Concussion Missiles was an early favorite of mine, and is still sometimes one of my favorite cards. It's 7 points, though, which makes it a little on the expensive side, but it does trigger that black crit to do an additional damage on each of the sides adjacent to the defending hull zone. So this basically boils down to 2 extra damage. Problem is that's going to go to shields, which is great when it combos with other mechanics that are working to drain shields. It's very high damage consistency as long as you can get that black crit, which is really awesome. But in this case, I had to give best in slot to Assault Proton Torpedoes. Again, you may disagree, but a big part of this is that it's, first off, it's face up. So that is going to work with a whole lot of different things, from everything from General Dodonna to getting lucky and it being that face-up card that absolutely changes the game and saves you. Like your flagship is there and it's going to die, and they get that crit that says you can't attack at long range, and all of a sudden you win the game now because they can't finish you off or something like that. Also, it's going straight to hull, so it bypasses shields completely. So this is actually better against a highly shielded ship if you get something like an MC-30 that is regenerating all of its shields or whatever. You can potentially get a crit on there, and it could be something that really, really hurts that ship. So there's a lot of things. And the other thing is this one's actually cheaper. 5 points is a lot easier to put on a black die delivery ship than 7. Even though it's only a 2-point difference, they add up over time. So I gave Assault Proton Torpedoes the best in slot for Ordnance. Next up is Ion Cannons. Ion Cannons is a slot that was really lousy and doesn't have that many great cards. The early star of this particular slot, though, was Leading Shots. It was really the Rebels' only way to have dice rerolls because Darth Vader, came out in Wave 2 for the Empire, and Empire kind of always had access to rerolls, and the Rebels never really had access to rerolls on a large scale. So Leading Shots was like the biggest way for them to have big amounts of rerolls. And so this was predominantly a Rebel card, although there were some Imperial lists that would use it as well. But it was, for a long time, it was best in slot, but I think it had to have gotten easily replaced by Heavy Ion Emplacements in Wave 7. Heavy Ion Emplacements is tremendous, and it really kind of does what that Assault Concussion Missile was trying to do, but in some ways does it even better, in that it's going to actually be 3 extra damage on that blue crit, draining shields on the left, right, and also the defending side. Very, very nice. The only there's 2 drawbacks. I guess you could say there's 3 drawbacks here, is that it costs 9 points, so it's expensive. 2 is you have to exhaust it, so you couldn't use it on both shots. And then 3, once shields are all down, it doesn't really do anything anymore. But that's no problem, because when the shields are all down, that means that ship is almost dead. So you're going to be all right there if your shields are all down. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Fire on a different ship and exhaust it on that ship instead. Heavy Ion Emplacements, best in slot. And finally, we're going to be talking about Turbo Laser. Turbo Lasers are nasty. They are one of my favorite upgrade slots because I love them red dice. I love being able to shoot from safety and have that chance of those doubles. And there's a lot of really, really good cards in this slot. There really are. So I want to talk about an early favorite was the XI7s that stops you from redirecting. This was maybe the most popular Turbo Laser for the first year or two of the game. Absolutely tremendous card. Was on just about every ship that could take it, with the exception of maybe, CR90As with Turbo Laser reroute circuits. But XI7, if you had a Star Destroyer or something like that, you probably ran XI7s because you just didn't want people to be able to just distribute their shields all over the place. And yeah, this one was pretty nasty, especially when they ratted it so where you couldn't equip a defensive retrofit that would advance deflectors to just totally counter it. So yeah, XI7's very, very strong, and it deserves mentioning. Now, some new stuff has come out that potentially beats XI7, at least situationally, and it's cheaper, right? Quad battery turrets is actually pretty cheap. It does take up the modification slot, but it gives you extra dice. So that's cool. And it's when attacking a ship with higher speed than yours, add a blue die to your attack pool. This one's great for a number of reasons. First off, it's cheap. You used to cost 10 points to add a die to your attack pool for enhanced armament when the game was brand new, and so that was kind of the precedent is 10 points for a die, or 9 points if it's spinal armament, something like that. But Quad was giving you that for almost half that price. At 5 points, you could get a blue die, and blue die have no blanks, so that's always a nice thing. Especially if you're like a rebel player that's maybe struggling for rerolls, I've got a blue die now. But it's also made even better when you think about things like heavy ion emplacements that you need a blue crit. Now all of a sudden you can trigger that blue crit at long range because you've got quad battery turrets. Now the biggest restriction here is that, if you're going too fast, this isn't going to fire. So, but for slow fleets, this is easily an amazing pick. So quad battery turrets is great, but it's not quite best in slot. I had to give best in slot to our newest Turbo Laser, Linked Turbo Laser Towers. This one is one of my favorite cards in the whole game, and it's one initially that I kind of was just like, it's just rerolls, but it's so many it's so much, it just does so much. So you can reroll a red die every time you attack, and with salvo being a thing now, you're going to be attacking a lot. And even though salvo says you can't add dice, which kind of hurts quad turbo lasers, right? You can reroll dice. So that's great. And red dice need rerolls, right? This is also really good for the rebels who are already hurting for rerolls, right? I mean, it's good for everybody, but it's also good for rebels too. So rebels appreciate it, maybe even a little bit more. But yes, you can reroll a red die in your attack pool. And then also, you have the ability to add 2 dice when you're attacking a squadron. Now, if you do that, you can only do that the one time, and then it stops that squadron attack, and it has to be your first squadron. But again, if you have red dice in there, you also get to reroll that, because you may reroll 1 red die in your attack pool. So if you happen to have red dice in your attack pool while attacking that squadron, you can also do that. There's so many really, really, really nice uses for this card, but especially now with salvo as well, it's just great. I mean, if it doesn't seem as flashy to me initially because I wasn't adding dice, but the amount of extra consistency, I have never taken this card and been anything but absolutely delighted with its performance. And that's the best in slot for Armada upgrades, guys. Let me know what you guys think. I'm going to be working on a worst in slot video here pretty soon. So if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down in the comments section. And we have a winner to talk about today, and that is going to be Clayman Films. Congratulations, Clayman Films. You just won a $25 Amazon gift card. Be sure to message me on the back end of my channel. You can find it on the About page there, or over on Crabok.com on the Contact Me. It's going to be mailcrabok@gmail.com. And shoot me your details, and we'll get your info and get you squared away there. If you did not win, don't worry. New giveaways starting probably tomorrow, maybe the next day, maybe tomorrow. They start all the time. They're running all the time. So all you have to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. All right, you guys, I want to thank you all so much, and big thanks to my patrons as well. You guys are amazing and help make this channel possible. Thank you so much, and as always, have a great day.